I think that worked. Okay. Let me know if it's not working. I can't really see. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here today and for your interest in the 2024 Knauss Marine Policy Fellowship. My name is Tanya Torres and my pronouns are she, her, and I am California Sea Grant's Marine Debris Research Associate based out of San Diego. And I'm going to be helping out my fellow colleagues today, gaining a little professional development by running today's webinar. I'm also joined today by a few other California Sea Grant staff members. We have Nick Sadrapour, our program coordinator. We have Madeline Wampler, our program analyst. I can't see yet if Carol Bailey Sumner is here, but she is our proposals and grants analyst. And then again, I'm not sure if Arminio Robles and Vivian Lay are here, but they are our fund managers. So give a wave. Thank you everyone for joining. And since I'm still a little new to this team, these folks are here to help me in answering any of your questions today. Speaking of questions, throughout today's webinar, if you could enter any questions that you have into the Q&A feature instead of the chat, that would be great. And then we will all try to answer them as we go along. And I just wanted to let you all know that we are recording this webinar and it will be posted on our website later today or tomorrow. That way you can access it at any point along your application journey. With that, thank you so much again for your interest in this fellowship, and we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so for today's agenda, I'm going to go over some general background information about the Sea Grant program and the Knauss Fellowship. I'll briefly cover some eligibility, application requirements, and our evaluation criteria. And then I'll run through how to submit using our online application portal, eSeaGrant. And then we'll go through the timeline for the next 12 months. And after that, we'll pause briefly for questions. And then we'll have our alumni panel for you to hear about previous Knauss Fellows experiences. And then we'll leave some time at the end to answer any more remaining questions that you have. And then that will be it for today. So let's get started. To give you a little background information on the Sea Grant program, Sea Grant was established through the National Sea Grant College and Program Act of 1966, and it was created to maintain a healthy coastal environment and economy, and it was modeled after the Land Grant Act of 1862, which had established agriculture and mechanic arts colleges programs. If you were familiar with like A&M schools, it only took about 100 years for us to do it for the sea, but here we are. That's where Sea Grant comes from. And so our network consists of federal university partnerships between the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and 34 university-based programs in every coastal and Great Lakes state, Puerto Rico, and Guam. Each program is mandated to initiate and support programs of research, extension, education, communication, and workforce development. A few states have multiple programs. California actually has two. So there's our program, the California Sea Grant program, which is based in San Diego. And then we also have the USC Sea Grant, which is located at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. And together, our programs draw on the expertise of scientists, engineers, public outreach experts, educators, and students to help citizens better understand, conserve, and utilize California's coastal resources. So for our program, the California Sea Grant program, all the work that we do falls under our strategic plan, which has 5 major focus areas, three of which are topical thematic groupings of the wide array of sea grant activities that address and respond to urgent coastal and ocean needs. Listed here is sustainable fisheries and aquaculture, healthy coastal ecosystems, and resilient communities and economies. And in addition, we have 2 cross-cutting focus areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and access, and environmental, as well as environmental literacy and workforce development that are foundational to all of our work and applicable across each of the topical focus areas I mentioned earlier. And essentially, all of these focus areas drive our required investments in research, education, as well as outreach. So getting into what we actually do, as our name indicates, we provide grants and funding to the larger marine and coastal research community in California. We also focus a lot of our work on outreach, science communication, and extension work, such as working with communities to provide and create resources for solving important coastal issues. But maybe less known is that we also provide a lot of fellowship opportunities, mostly at the graduate and postgraduate level, as we prepare and train the up-and-coming workforce into the ocean science-related fields. So today we're talking about the Knauss Fellowship, which falls under our workforce development goals, which are, we hope that we can create a diverse and environmentally literate California, which can range from local communities all the way up to formal decision makers, and ensuring that they have access to the best available information to engage informed personal choices, participatory decision making, and community planning processes that can enable adaptation and mitigation to changing conditions. Our other goal is that we can create a diverse, skilled, and environmentally literate workforce that is prepared to build prosperous livelihoods in a changing world while addressing critical local, regional, and national needs through traditional and innovative careers. So if that sounds like something that you're looking for, then you're in the right place. So the Sea Grant Knauss Fellowship provides a unique educational and professional experience to graduate students, specifically those who have an interest in ocean, coastal, Great Lake resources, and the national policy decisions that affect those resources. This program is one of our many fellowships we offer, but is unique in that it matches graduate students with host offices in the legislative and executive branches of government located in Washington, D.C. for a one-year paid fellowship. So since 1979, Sea Grant has brought over 1,500 fellows to work in approximately 80 different offices in the executive and legislative branches of government. And about 50% of fellowship alumni actually end up working for the federal government. And this year's 2023 Knauss Fellowship finalists actually came from all over the country, as you can see from this map. 54% of them are completing master's degrees, 44% are completing PhDs, and 2% are completing JD programs or law degrees. And so this just shows that there's really no preference between which degree you are completing, just as long as you're enrolled at the time of your application. And the 2024 executive and legislative host list has not been released yet and usually is released quite late. So we don't have that to share with you today. However, as soon as it is available, we'll post it on our website. But just to give you an idea, here is kind of a sample of what the 2023 hosts are. And so for the legislative branch, we have a Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works, House Committee on Natural Resource, Water, Oceans, and Wildlife, Senator Cory Booker's office, Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation Science. And then for the executive branch, examples are the Executive Office of the President, the NOAA National Marine Fisheries Service Office of Science and Technology, the U.S. Department of Energy Wind Energy Technologies Office, the NOAA Office of International Affairs, and the NOAA Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research Climate Program Office, as well as the Ocean Acidification Program. So you can also visit our Knauss Fellowship page, which will list all of this year's hosts if you'd like to see more examples. And I'm hoping Nick can drop that link in the chat for you so you have that. Yeah. And then moving on to kind of the eligibility. So any student, regardless of your citizenship, is eligible to submit to this opportunity. Just as long as you are enrolled towards a degree in a graduate program at any point between 2022 fall term and the application due date, which is February 16th, 2023. And so you just have to be enrolled at your time of application. That's one of the main requirements. And your degree that you're working towards needs to be coming from an accredited institution in the US or US territory. And as long as you have an interest in ocean, coastal, and Great Lake resources and policies, you'll do just fine. And so just a reminder that the Knauss Fellows are seen as more than just students or interns. They are treated like a member of the staff during their fellowship and given a lot of responsibility. You will have the opportunity to sit in on important meetings or contribute to projects that you probably wouldn't have gotten a chance to otherwise as a student or just starting a job right out of grad school. So it's a really great opportunity to be able to wrap up your graduate school and then directly transition into and get a little taste of what employed life with a federal agency in this field would be like. And so I would say that this fellowship is a really good fit for a highly motivated recent graduate student who has focused on marine or aquatic related fields, who's interested in making professional contributions to the office that they're in, are capable of working alongside state and federal partners, and are excited to learn about and help with the process of policymaking and resource management. All right, so now I'm going to outline a little bit about this year's application requirements, but please know that this is just an overview and there's more details that can be found in all the wonderful resources on our website. And of course, we are here for you if you have any questions along the way. And I'm hoping Nick can also add the link to our website that has a lot of those resources in the chat for you right now. And so, okay, so first up is your CV. It must be 2 pages. I know that's hard, but if it's longer than 2 pages, the reviewers will not see more than just 2 pages. So try to be 2 pages. And we suggest trying to be concise, highlight your most relevant achievements, and if possible, take some space to provide additional details for context. So for example, don't just list an award you've won, but maybe tell what the award was for. And one very important point on the CV is that though it's usually very common to include personal information with your CV, such as your name, your address, your contact information, we really please ask you to not include this information just per our reviewing requirements. Otherwise, we will have to manually go in and redact your materials, and no one wants to create extra work, right? But if you can try to just eliminate your personal contact information, that would be great. Secondly, your personal education and career development responses. So this component is broken up into 3 sections, or you'll get to tell us a little more about yourself, your career path, and your life experiences. We recommend that you don't just repeat your CV and instead try to complement or expand on your CV and provide further details of why each experience makes you a good candidate for this fellowship. We also encourage you to think beyond just your academics. So talk about your professional, personal life experiences that make you who you are today. Next is your relevant coursework and future year plans. So we understand that there is going to be a large gap between the application submission and the start date. So this is an opportunity for you to talk about any kind of coursework, internship, or job opportunities that you have lined up in that time period that you believe can add to your qualifications. And if you don't have anything set in stone, then that's fine. You can also talk about what opportunities you're looking into or interested in that can apply to or support your application. And then we've got the 2 letters of recommendation. So these should also be 2 pages. And with at least one of the letters coming from a faculty member who has interacted with you in an academic or research setting. And then as just a general tip, we really highly recommend that you schedule a meeting with your letter writers, discuss the fellowship opportunity, the selection criteria, highlight your most relevant professional experiences. This can help make the process really easy for your writer, as well as strengthen your own letters, taking them, by talking with them one-on-one about your experiences and career goals. And then lastly, we'd also ask for copies of your undergraduate and graduate transcripts. Unofficial copies are A-OK. These are mainly just a reference only, and they won't actually be part of your scored application package, but we do ask for them. So unofficials are okay. All right, so a little application tip here is that one thing we really value and we're looking for when we're reviewing your applications is your application cohesion. And so we'll be looking at your application as a whole. We're not just focusing on your CV. We're not just focusing on your interview skills. We really value every component of your application. It plays a real important role into the whole evaluation process. So please spend time on each and every one of the components because they're all important and should complement each other and contribute to your application as a whole. Which is why, we've got this little quote here, view your application package as pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that reflect the best and complete picture of who you are. Every piece of the puzzle counts. All right, moving on to our evaluation criteria. This is just going to be an overview. Please take a closer look at these criteria on our website as well as a national website. All the handouts are there, so definitely make sure to read those. And Nick, if you haven't dropped those in the chat yet, that would be a great time. So when we're going through your applications, we want to see goal statements. Goal statements that are specific, direct, concise, and really talk about what you as the applicant would bring to and gain from the fellowship. We want your career or life goals clearly stated, and we don't expect you to know these exactly. We understand that could be really hard to say at this stage of your career, but what we're looking for is evidence that you've given thought to it. Why this experience is going to be important for you and how this fellowship will launch you into the next step of your career. We also want to see the breadth of your experiences and achievements, tap into your upbringing, your hobbies, your volunteering, and any extracurriculars, anything that can complement your academic background and future career aspirations. And also, bring anything that can bring in diverse perspectives to the program. We're always looking for that. And lastly, we look for how well your career path and objectives align with the broader mission of the National Secret Program at NOAA. We want to see your interest as well as your commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and accessibility, as it is a huge priority for us at this moment. All right, now we're at the how to submit process. I'm going to walk you through the online platform called EC Grant, which Nick will also drop the link in the chat for you. And just a reminder, this is going to be recorded and you can refer back to it anytime. And it gets a little complicated, but hopefully we can help you with this. But here is a screen grab of the registration page. Be sure to register if you haven't already. And then you'll log in using the login tab with that information. And if you have any questions at this stage, please reach out to us and let us know. We can help you. We know it can be a little burdensome to mess with clunky websites. But one thing I would recommend is that you use an email address that you can check regularly and won't lose access to for at least the next year or so. And then, so once you log in, you will see in your portal the option to add the fellowship application, and you will click this blue button to activate the application, which will then put it into your current tasks list on the sidebar on the left there. Another way to do it, a different view could be, so once you log in, you can click funding opportunities and then fellowships, and then you should see the option to add the 2024 Knauss fellowship application. And once the application is added to your current tasks, then you can navigate from that sidebar and click the blue text to begin or open the application. And then once you enter the application, then you will see on the sidebar all of the application components. So please familiarize yourself with each and every one of those sections so that nothing catches you by surprise. And then once you finish a section, be sure to click the mark as complete checkbox here, which will then turn the red dot on the sidebar to green, indicating that you are good to go. And then last but not least, once you finish all the sections, make sure to go to the very bottom left of the sidebar to the submission page and then click the submit button in the top right. Once you submit your application, you will then receive a confirmation email that your submission was successful. You'll also be notified that you can change and resubmit your application at any time prior to the submission deadline. All right, so looking forward ahead at our timeline over the next 12 months, the application is due by February 16th, 2023 at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then from February to March, California Seat Grant will review applications and conduct interviews over Zoom. And then by late March, we will select up to 6 finalists and send their applications to the national review process. Finalists should be chosen by June of this year, And then it is being required that all finalists reserve the date of June 21st, 2023 from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for a virtual orientation. And then by about November, December is when the placement week would happen. And the selected finalists are required to travel to Washington, D.C. for interviews with potential hosts. And then February 1st of 2024 would be the fellowship start date. So I know that was a really quick overview, but that concludes our Knauss Fellowship application overview for today. I will now stop and we can take any questions before we move into our alumni panel. So I can stop sharing my screen so that I can see you. There we go. All right, so we do have a question in the Q&A. All right, so we said, one question is, are those who are recommended to the national office finalists, or are finalists selected from the pool recommended to the national office? Nick, did you want to answer this question?
I was going to let you do it, but I can.
Oh, well, it says Nick Sajapur is going to answer this question.
Oh, sorry. I was just trying to clean up for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Here, I'll come off. So those that are recommended to the national office are not finalists. There's another round of review that the national office does that then elevates a subset of those as finalists to the matching process.
Complicated. A lot of levels. Okay, we have another question here. Could you get placed with a state representative for a state other than California? That's a great question. I might have to defer back to Nick on that one.
Yes, you can absolutely be placed with a representative in the House or the Senate for a state outside other than California.
Thank you, Nick. And then we have one last question here. It says, do all finalists get matched?
We'll probably talk about this a little bit with the alumni. I would say generally, yes, almost every finalist is eventually matched with the host, but I'll say too that not every one of those matches is accepted by the finalist.
All right, so can you please elaborate more on the interviews in February and March? So these, I think, will be the interviews. So if we will be reviewing your written applications and then getting back to you all to have a virtual interview so that we can make our decision of the 6 finalists that we are going to send up to the national. Is that correct, Nick? And that was something that we will schedule with you. Does that answer your question, Rachel? I think so. Great. Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, we can move on to our alumni panel where you can ask previous Knauss Fellows about their experiences. And if you think of any other questions, we will have time at the end to bring any of those up as well. So now I'd like to invite, we have Amanda is here, Sean is here. Hi, let me bring up my screen one last time. Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure if is Karina here yet? she might roll in. That's great. We're gonna move forward though. So thank you, my alumni panelists. I want to welcome, we have 3 here. Well, Karina might show up very soon. We've got Karina Fish, Sean Mullen, and Amanda Carter, who are here to talk to you today about their experience as a Knauss Fellow and answer any questions that they have. So here is their information, but I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so that we can see their faces. But if you need to reach out to them, I'm sure they'll happy to give you their contact information and everything. So first I'm gonna start with some introductions. So alumni, you can go ahead and introduce yourselves, and we can start with Amanda. How about you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda Carter, and as you saw up on the screen, I'm currently a Government and Congressional Affairs Specialist at the National Science Foundation. I was a 2019 Knauss Fellow, and I was in the research arm of NOAA, working in congressional affairs for them. So that is where I was, and then I actually stayed in that office and worked for them for a while before coming over to the National Science Foundation. And prior to that, I completed my PhD at Scripps Institution of Oceanography in 2018. And I had been at Scripps for about 10 years, first as an undergraduate volunteer, and then employee, and then master's student, and then PhD student. So a long time. Yeah, and I'm happy to answer any questions and also provide my contact information as well.
Thank you, Amanda. Sean, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hi, everybody. So Sean Mullen. I was a fellow last year in the office of Congressman John Garamendi, who at that time represented Fairfield, Davis, upwards towards Reading area. Nowadays, he's mostly just the Fairfield and Delta areas. After my fellowship, I moved over to the office of Senator Dianne Feinstein, where I cover forestry emergency response, including the storms y'all are experiencing. Animals, telecom, a bunch of things. That's kind of the vibe, generally speaking, in personal offices on the Hill. You have a very wide portfolio. Prior to being a Knauss Fellow, I did my PhD at Caltech, defended in 2020, and prior to that was I did my undergrad at Berkeley up north. California, born and raised.
Excellent. Thanks, John. All right, so I have a few prompted questions, but we can also open the floor to anyone on the call that has questions. So feel free to populate the Q&A or raise your hand at any time. But to get us started, maybe I'll start with one of my prompted questions for you both. The question is, if there are many paths we can take while we are wrapping up or finishing a graduate program, so how did you know that the Knauss Fellowship was the one for you, or what ultimately led you to decide to apply and accept the fellowship? So Sean, maybe let's start with you.
Sure. Yeah. So my PhD was in microbiology. I mostly focused on deep sea ocean research and methane vents. To be honest with you, I didn't actually know about the Knauss Fellowship until I visited NOAA on a policy trip that I took with other Caltech students. Had the chance to meet with some folks at NOAA and said, how do scientists even come to be a part of NOAA? And they pointed me towards the Knauss Fellowship and other fellowships that get you onto the Hill and elsewhere. There's probably more ways to get into the executive branch as a scientist. But from my perspective, unless you have a good history of doing internships and other kinds of activities on the Hill, it's very difficult to break into a Hill job unless you have a fellowship like this, like the Knauss Fellowship or AAAS, something like that, in order to get you that in the door. So I thought that policy was a great fit for me in general, just given my skill set and background and interests, and was really excited about the idea that I could do something that was focused on marine policy, given my background.
Great. Exciting. And you, Amanda?
Yeah, so I knew about the Knauss Fellowship. Scripps tends to have Knauss Fellows pretty much every year, and I had a number of friends that had done it previously. and I was interested in kind of leaving academia for a while, having a little bit of a change of pace, and thought that this would be a really good fit. Talked to a number of friends, was interested in potentially working at NOAA after finishing at my PhD as well. So it just seemed like a great opportunity. And yeah, it ended up, I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the change of pace after being in academia for so long. I do really miss research, but I was just ready to have something a little bit faster paced going on. Also, apologies if you can hear my daughter yelling in the background. She is okay, good. And yeah, so that was kind of why I came out here, and then stayed with NOAA and have really enjoyed it. And I also agree with Sean, doing the congressional affairs side of things. Obviously, I work directly with the Hill, and I agree that it is a really great way to get an in into legislative offices, if you're a scientist, because otherwise it's more difficult to make those connections and come and work on the Hill. And then same thing for the position that I'm in now. This is not a position that I would apply for, obviously, just with an academic resume. So it gives you a really nice breadth of policy work. And I will say, having talked to, when I was debating between doing a postdoc after my year or continuing in my office, a number of PIs that I talked to also really viewed the Knauss as a positive for having someone come in and do a postdoc too, because it kind of takes you out of the microcosm of graduate school and gives you a larger view of sort of where science actually gets translated into policy, which I sort of think every scientist should have to do at some point. That was my soapbox. I'll stop.
No, excellent soapbox. I agree. Yeah, what a great experience. Is there something that you both could talk about, like a project or deliverable that you were really proud of or that you contributed to during your fellowship, kind of like get the excitement going for future applicants?
Sure, I'm happy to start
yeah.
again, if that's all right.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so and just to give some context to anyone on here that's interested in the legislative side. So once you are a finalist, a Knauss finalist, you generally get matched with an office, but the national office will, you ask the national office whether they place you either on the legislative side or the executive side. There's around, I don't know, what, Amanda, like 80 executive branch fellows and like 20 legislative branch fellows. So you will be parsed at that point and then decide at that point whether you'll be legislative or executive. But from my perspective, on the legislative side, the big deliverables I would say is generally legislation. And so certainly if you're writing legislation, writing letters, working to get things passed. House offices, which is where I was, tend to have very small staffs. You might not realize it's like 7 to 10 staffers usually. And as such, there's usually very limited bandwidth, and they're pretty happy to have fellows, especially with some level of expertise in the science. So I kind of came in and picked up a lot of the environmental items that have been sort of on the back burner. And we, I think we introduced 2 or 3 new bills that were completely new to the congressman's office. And I would say substantially improved a handful of others after taking a look at them and trying to sort of bring additional stakeholder feedback and science into the mix. One of the ones that we introduced at that time was related to aquatic invasive species, like, zebra mussels. And a big chunk of that bill got included in the recent NDAA, the big defense bill that got passed a couple months ago. So pretty proud of that for sure. It's always fun to see your text get passed into law. So yeah.
Very cool. Congrats.
Sure.
And you, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No.
Actually, as a result of the fact that I was in an executive office, but in a congressionally focused executive office, I would say one of the big highlights for me was also legislation. I had the opportunity during my fellowship to work really closely with Congresswoman Bonamici's office on getting the Coast Research Act, which reauthorizes essentially the ocean acidification research legislation. And I have background in that field and worked really closely with her office on that legislation. And then that actually ended up passing along with a few other bills that I worked on passing the House. And it was also exciting because I got to see it pass. I got to be in the chamber, and actually the Sea Grant reauthorization was another one that I worked on a lot and passed as well. So those were all very rewarding.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank
I
you.
could say that my year of fellows was very appreciative that you all passed the second reauthorization bill.
Yeah.
That was a long time coming.
Great. So I'm not seeing any questions from any participants on the call. So I'm going to keep going with my questions. My next question is, what
Hey,
was,
Tanya?
yes,
I think we have Karina calling in. I'm going to try to add her in.
that would be excellent. Thank you, Nick.
Karina, I think you might need to try unmuting because I just gave you permission to talk.
Hi, this is Karina.
Hi, Karina. Apologies if you had some technical trouble getting in, but glad you're here on the phone.
Yeah, sorry I joined
No.
via video, but I am happy to answer questions, as many as you want to ask.
Perfect. And yeah, no problem. So my name is Tanya, and I'm just the MC here today. But would you mind introducing yourself, your name, and your fellowship year, where you were hosted, and then what your current role is now?
Sure. So I'm Karina Fish, and I am a 2022 Knauss Fellow, and so I am just now wrapping up my fellowship. I am placed in Senator Booker's office, and I worked on his environment and energy portfolio. And I'm obviously was from California Sea Grant, so that's all I have to say.
Great. Thank you so much. We just answered, I think, one question. So I think it was if you had a big project or deliverable that you're really proud of that you contributed to during your fellowship, if you wouldn't mind telling the folks on the call to get them excited about what they could potentially do in their fellowship.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the big thing that I was really proud of so far, I shepherded through a congressional oversight letter to the Consumer Product Safety Council. And it was on gas stoves and the harms it has to both the human health aspect, but also to climate. And so it was really cool seeing it from start to finish and being the point person for it throughout it, and making sure it was like bicameral and made waves in the media. You might actually be seeing some news articles recently on that. So I'm really proud of being able to say that I was the one who shepherded that through.
Wow, I just read an article about this morning. Well, congratulations. Yes, that's really great.
Thanks.
Okay, so a question for all of you. What is something that you least expected or maybe surprised you about the fellowship? And maybe we'll start with you, Karina, if that's okay.
Something that I didn't expect was how much I knew I was going to learn a lot, but in terms of everything kind of shifted my understanding of how important committees are to the legislative process. And so since I'm on the Hill for the year, I really had my entire perspective of how even environmental justice, which is like an issue I care very deeply about, just like was blown wide open from the policy angle. Just seeing how things have been being baked since the 90s, and I just never knew there was so much depth of knowledge of EJ on the Hill. So I don't think everything always makes it outside of the chambers and the halls of Congress, but they are working on these issues in depth. So it's really cool to see that firsthand, and it really surprised me.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. That's good to know. Amanda, how about you? Something that least expected or surprised you about your fellowship?
I'm trying to think about what would be the best. I guess just getting a little bit of a view into the amount of bureaucratic red tape that exists was definitely, I think that it exists and you hear about it, but until you actually have to work around it. It is a whole different beast. And, I think coming from academia and stuff, it's just not something that you really run into at all. So it was pretty shocking to see people will think that the government doesn't work super quickly or that there are other things, but the reality is that a lot of what's happening within offices, or for example, if we would get a request from the Hill or something like that, those turnaround times would be really quick and we would get those things produced super quickly. And then you have to allow days to weeks for some things like reports and things where you're working with the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House. You sometimes have to allow months of time for getting through all the red tape to actually get approval to send something back. So that was something that I think I knew in theory existed, but actually having to work with it and work around it was definitely a whole new experience.
I totally hear you on that one. How about you, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a huge learning curve, I would say, in general, just in terms of how everyone works together or doesn't. But I would say there's a couple main takeaways. One of them, I think, was just how much sort of government surrounds you that's kind of invisible all the time. When you look at like highway projects, I now have more of an appreciation for all the different pathways that I had to go through to get there and the funding streams through state and federal and just all of that. So I think that's really useful just for as a citizen to kind of have an appreciation for the amount of work that goes into those things. I think the thing that probably surprised me the most was, kind of on Amanda's point, things can look like they're taking a long time, but there is just a lot of work that goes into everything that happens in the government, just man hours and people hours that go into this. And I think oftentimes people think that we're sort of feckless, but we are trying, I would say in general, to solicit expertise from various sectors. And really, the whole of society in America is handled by a surprisingly few number of people in their 20s and 30s. There's just a lot of work that goes into trying to make that as best as possible, even if it doesn't look like it's all that successful sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's good perspective. Thank you for that.
I have to add to that. I would also agree that like when you first do your round, for me, like of taking a director to the Hill and doing a bunch of meetings, it is shocking how many like 22-year-old undergraduates are like making really, 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 really big decisions.
Interesting. So we do actually have a question from someone on the call, and they ask, is there anything in your personal life or a unique component of your professional academic experience that you feel has contributed in an unexpectedly impactful, positive way to your time spent as a fellow? So I'll let anyone want to comment on that.
I actually have I think a good example of something for that. I was part of why I was interested in the Knauss Fellowship too, was that I was able to contribute to funding that was received by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service through some of my research out at the remote atoll that I worked at. And they were actually able to get funding to remove a shipwreck out there that had an invasive species associated with it based on my work and the work of my lab and everything that had gone into that. And that was a very cool intro into sort of working with agencies and seeing some science actually get translated into some meaningful action, because I think that's not something that, we always get to see at that level. And that contributed definitely for part of why I really enjoyed my fellowship and really got to enjoy seeing sort of like how the sausage is made in terms of all of, that whole area, actually seeing how science gets translated into research and what actually makes it through the pipeline and everything as well.
Very cool.
Yeah, I would maybe add a couple of things that came to mind. I was I kind of helped run the LGBTQ association at my university when I was there. And I think that kind of experience can be really useful in terms of just making sure that, you're reaching out to various groups and trying to build consensus and organizing events and just kind of keeping an organized schedule in general. So that I think is really useful. A number of research cruises that I went on and sort of helped organize. I think that kind of experience can also be really useful in terms of not only time management, but just sort of working through all of the various, let's call it red tape in terms of, maybe getting samples back and just sort of planning ahead. And then maybe on the more fun side, I'm a big fan of like complicated board games and, the ones that have multiple books that maybe are associated. I think that is really valuable experience for navigating the US code.
That is a great, unique perspective. Thanks for that. I love that. Karina, did you have anything to add to that question at all?
Yeah, I guess it was like everything that I considered to be service work during my graduate school years were things that I actually leaned upon heavily for my position on the Hill. So like I did I was coordinator for a seminar series that brought together some EJ luminaries, and those contacts were actually the ones that I were interacting with during my fellowship year. So it was really cool to see like things that I thought were more ancillary to what I've been working on for the past 6 years really come in handy once I was in the fellowship. So definitely just everything outside of your graduate studies probably are going to come in handy finally and be rewarded for.
I agree. I think definitely on where I've landed in my career today, definitely I relied heavily on a lot of volunteering other than just my studies. So I agree with that. There is a couple more questions that came through, so that's excellent. Thank you. Keep them coming. Someone asks, could you give advice on aspects of your personal or career experience that you highlighted in your application? So something that you thought was, I guess, really great to highlight while applying for this position.
Well, I can tell you that the advice that I got from the folks at NOAA when I applied and when I first found out about this was to try to be as specific as possible in terms of your eventual career plans and really try to think through how the fellowship, how working in policy, getting this, making this inroad will help you get there. And one of the ways that I tried to do that was really trying to look at the policy side of my science and bringing that to my application. So, as I mentioned earlier, I worked on like microbiology of methane vents and deep sea, microbiology in general. So I talked about seabed mining in my application and just sort of like the policy wrinkles that go into that and try to kind of dive deep a little bit and sort of think through how my background might help support that. So I think those kinds of examples really sort of showing, like demonstrating your interest in policy, in my opinion, is really valuable.
I'll sort of piggyback onto that too, which is that piece of advice I received from past fellows and other connections was also to highlight your willingness to work across the aisle and to kind of work on both sides of policies and politics too. If you go the legislative route, then you may be placed in an R office, you may be placed in a D office. And you need to be, willing to work with both sides. And then same thing for the executive branch. I was a 2019 fellow and we had a different president at that time. And I was working at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. And so there definitely is a, emphasizing your ability to work with both sides and your willingness to do so, I think is also helpful.
Great advice. Thank you. Well, Karina, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the science communication is definitely something I highlighted in my application, going back to the point that the others have made, making sure you have a story. And so humans love stories, and you should have a personal story of why you're looking to get experience in either branches of government. And so making that compelling pitch and making it tie into your overall career, aspirations, that's key. And then, openness and willingness to be, you're going to learn so much during your fellowship that you should be open to whatever placement you get. So there's, even if you're not, shooting for a D office or, an executive placement, just be open to any experience and convey that in your application, because every experience is pretty great here.
I love that. Thank you. So you also have a question, which was one of my questions, so this is great. Can you share a little bit more about what your typical day in the life was like as a fellow? And I'm sure it might be different for all of you, but maybe briefly going into like, what you did in a day, like were you at an office every day, and like maybe explaining a little more like who was telling you what to do, who did you report to, what was your work office dynamic like?
I'm
I'll
happy
pick
to. Oh, sorry.
Amanda. No, yeah, I was gonna pick you anyway. Go ahead, Amanda.
I'm happy to kick that off. So my position really didn't have a typical day, which was part of what I really loved about it. It was definitely a bit of a fire hose a lot of the time, but I really enjoyed that. So I was frequently running in between NOAA headquarters, up onto the Hill for briefings. Days consisted of either having briefings with staff or members of Congress with various people in leadership roles at NOAA, working on legislation. I normally had a few pieces of legislation that we were providing comments and feedback on, working on forward-thinking things, setting up larger all-interested staff briefings. My boss at the time, the assistant administrator for OAR was Craig McLean. He has a huge, had a huge international component to his work, and was traveling a lot. So dealing with his schedules and getting the meetings that he was interested in as well, are all things. And I think Sean and I actually had a conversation. I think that you talked to Alan Leonardi, but yeah. So the one of the ocean exploration program at NOAA was getting legislation was being worked on for that. And that was a big part of my day. And that required a bunch of different things. So yeah, unpredictability, which was something I really enjoyed.
Great. Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I would second the idea of it being it's not a clear typical day, especially. I think on the Hill, you're drafting legislation, you're running legislation past other offices and trying to get them on board and taking their edits and whatnot, reading a lot in terms of news, but also trying to get as much data as possible to support whatever you're trying to do. It's writing letters to executive branch offices or whoever else trying to get some kind of administrative action across the finish line or started. It's taking meetings with stakeholders. It's answering constituent mail sometimes. I would say that the few things that I didn't do as a fellow, because I was often relegated sort of lower down in terms of the work chain, was more on the sort of answering phone call side and doing like drafting constituent responses. I usually didn't do a lot of that as a fellow. I wasn't usually put as a fellow in the midst of those kind of like really political conversations. My experience as a fellow was more on the sort of we're going to use your scientific expertise and try to get some new things going that maybe we didn't have that expertise for previously. That's different now. My role now is as a political person in a senator's office. That's different now. But as a fellow, I was somewhat shielded from that, I would say.
And Karina?
Yeah, not much to add after that, because we're similarly a fellow in the legislative office, personal office, has a similar role. But I met with constituents and outside advocacy groups. I ran outreach for a bill that we introduced last Congress. And so that was really great, gathering expertise from outside of Congress to make sure that, we're making a really well-informed bill text and whatnot. So that was really great. And I think the other part of the fellowship that I don't want to leave out for sure, because right now I'm actually in the EPA basement at one of the Congress centers, is because professional development opportunities are fantastic. You can use your other fellows to go explore what their placements are like. So right now we're actually on a tour of about, I think 14 of us have visited one fellow at the EPA today. So we're able to do that because we're on a fellowship and we're here to learn. We're able to take, time off from a regular schedule of, if I was just a regular staffer on the Hill, I wouldn't be able to take time off during the day to take advantage of these opportunities. So these professional development opportunities are pretty great and unique to a fellowship position like this.
Right, I agree, definitely. Thank you. And we're coming up, we got 4 minutes left. We do have one last question in the Q&A box here. So this person is asking if you all anticipate staying in DC for the foreseeable future. They recognize that Knauss comes with great networking opportunities in DC, but they want to know if many fellows successfully transition into state or local politics afterwards. So, and maybe like, what do you know yourselves, and maybe other fellows from your cohorts, if you are aware of that, if you can just answer to that. And we'll start with Sean.
Yeah, there are certainly folks that in my class that went back and worked in the state. I don't actually think there was anyone from my class that went back and worked for state or local governments. You know, obviously this is a national placement. It places you either in the national legislative or executive branch, but I think you could leverage that if you wanted to. Probably from my perspective, and maybe Amanda has better perspective on this, but probably my perspective, it's easier to leverage that into an executive branch placement in the state government, just because, you know, the kind of work is going to be similar in terms of administrating rules and doing that kind of work. The legislative branch is so much about networking and like building those personal connections to other staffers and other offices that I could imagine it might be a little harder to do that. But you know, I don't think it would be impossible.
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up on that. I have some friends that did the Knauss Fellowship that work for the California state government. So that's definitely a possibility. I think it sets you up well, like adding that to your resume, having worked in policy looks great. One of those friends was a Ledge Fellow. And yeah, I would agree with what Sean said. I think a lot of fellows get placement within or stay in DC and work in the executive branch or move elsewhere. I do agree that I know a number of executive fellows that did go and work in Hill offices. A lot of them, though, were in offices more similar to what I was in and what I'm currently in, where you're in one of the policy and congressionally oriented offices. So you have the ability to make those connections on the Hill. Because if you're working within one of the program offices, that doesn't happen quite as much. That being said, I did feel the need to point out the Knauss, and Karina talked to us a little bit, the networking opportunities that come along with the fellowship, I honestly think are one of the best parts for you to build those connections. And you kind of get almost like a wild card, like a hall pass when you're a Knauss fellow for contacting like very, very important people and saying like, hi, I'm a Knauss, because in DC, almost every office that you will go to, there's someone that was a Knauss fellow in that office. And so I do think you get a little bit of a hall pass with contacting people and asking to just do like an informational interview or ask them about, you know, get coffee and ask them about their career path and how they got to where they are. And that can open up a lot of job opportunities as well.
What a great hack. And lastly, Karina, we got 1 minute left, but if you could provide your insight there.
Yeah, sure. So I think we're right down in the middle of everyone in the next position. So it really runs the gamut whether folks are staying in DC or going elsewhere. People who've had my position on Senator Booker's office in the past have gone on to run for office at the municipal level in California. One works for a city government, municipal government in Washington State. One works in Alaska. So yeah, there's definitely opportunities to like enter the state or municipal politics. And then in terms of my current cohort, folks are, you know, returning back to academia to do a postdoc, or they are going to executive branch from the legislative branch, or they have gone to a contracting position. So yeah, it really runs the gamut what you can do once you're done. I think it's all as unique as the actual placements are, because each office is and each placement is very different. So every pass after that is all uniquely different as well.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much. I just want to thank you all for being here and answering all these questions. I know we're at time. I did drop some links in the chat. If anyone needs to reach out to us, our email is sgproposal@ucsd.edu. And then we also encourage you to sign up for our newsletters to stay up to date on any information from California Sea Grant, as well as make sure to check back at our website for RFP for any updated information pertaining to the Knauss Fellowship. That's where you'll get all the information. So yes, and if one of my panelists wouldn't mind putting their contact information in the chat, that'd be great. So if any future applicants would like to reach out and ask you questions, that would be amazing. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.